Jacob Miller stood in the observation deck of Europa mining colony, watching ice crystals dance across the moon's frozen surface. He had spent 12 years building this place from nothing into a thriving community of 3,000 souls. The colony extracted rare minerals from beneath Europa's ice sheet, minerals that powered Earth's growing fleet of exploration vessels. Jacob felt proud every time he looked at the sprawling complex of tunnels and habitation domes that stretched for miles beneath the ice. Linda Price rushed into the observation deck, her face pale and covered in sweat. She was Jacob's second in command and never panicked, which made her current expression terrifying. She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the sensor station without saying a word. Jacob's heart began to race as he followed her through the narrow corridors. The sensor room buzzed with activity. Peter Hayes, their communications officer, pointed at multiple screens showing dozens of unknown contacts appearing in Jupiter's orbit. The signatures were unlike anything in the database. These weren't Earthships or registered commercial vessels. They were something else entirely. Jacob opened a communication channel to ask who they were and what they wanted. He received no response. The unknown vessels moved into formation with military precision, their engines burning bright as they accelerated toward Europa. Jacob felt ice fill his veins as he realized what was about to happen. He grabbed the colony-wide alert system and shouted for everyone to reach the emergency shelters immediately. His voice echoed through every tunnel and dome in the colony. People dropped their tools and ran. Parents grabbed children. Workers helped the elderly. They had drilled for this scenario 100 times, never believing it would actually happen. The first plasma blast struck the main habitation dome. The structure that housed 1,500 people vaporized in an instant. The explosion sent shockwaves through the entire colony network. Jacob screamed as he watched the devastation on the monitors. Linda was already directing people toward the deepest shelters, but there wasn't enough time. The alien warships moved closer, their weapons firing with cold efficiency. They targeted life support systems, power generators, and communication arrays. One by one, the colony's sections went dark. Peter managed to send out a distress signal before a plasma bolt destroyed the entire communication center. The last thing Jacob saw on the sensors was Peter's life signs disappearing. Jacob, Linda, and 800 others huddled in the reinforced emergency shelter 3 miles beneath the ice. The shelter's walls shook with each impact above them. Children cried. Adults sat in stunned silence. The emergency lighting cast everyone's face in an eerie red glow. Jacob tried to keep his composure, but inside he was screaming. 2,200 people had died in less than an hour, and he couldn't do anything to stop it. The bombardment continued for 6 more hours before the alien ships finally stopped firing. Jacob waited another 12 hours before sending scouts to assess the damage. What they found broke his heart. The colony was gone. Every dome had been destroyed. Every surface structure reduced to melted metal and shattered ice. Bodies floated in the frozen vacuum where habitation sections had been. Far away on Earth, Admiral Richard Cole sat in his office at United Earth Defense Headquarters when the priority alert flashed across his screen. He read Peter's distress signal 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood it. He hadn't. An alien force had attacked Europa without warning or provocation. They had massacred over 2,000 civilians. Richard immediately contacted President Catherine Ross. Within 30 minutes, the president had assembled the Emergency Defense Council in the Situation Room, deep beneath Geneva. The room filled with military commanders, scientists, and government officials, all trying to process what had happened. Henry Grant, the chief military strategist, pulled up the tactical analysis on the main screen. The alien attack showed clear military doctrine. They had targeted strategic locations with precision. This wasn't random violence. This was conquest. Henry's voice was steady as he explained that this attack was likely just the beginning. As if to confirm Henry's analysis, every communication system on Earth suddenly activated with an incoming message. The alien broadcast appeared on every screen, every monitor, and every device capable of receiving a signal. The message was in perfect English, which meant these aliens had been studying humanity for some time. The face on the screen was reptilian, with golden scales and vertical pupils. The creature identified itself as Commander Zethrax of the Vrix Dominion. His voice was cold and mechanical as he delivered humanity's ultimatum. Surrender within 48 hours or face complete annihilation. The Vrix Dominion had conquered 17 star systems. Humanity would become the 18th. Zethrax listed humanity's crimes with contempt in his voice. Humans had spread to multiple worlds without asking permission from the Vrix. Humans had harvested resources that belonged to the Dominion. Humans existed in space that the Vrix claimed as their territory. For these crimes, humanity would submit or die. The broadcast ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. President Ross looked around the table at her advisors. Some looked terrified. Others looked angry. Henry Grant looked thoughtful, as if he was already planning their response. Richard Cole felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Pure rage burned through his chest. These aliens had killed innocent miners who were just trying to feed their families. They had murdered children. They had attacked without even trying to communicate. And now they expected humanity to simply roll over and accept slavery. The president asked Richard what humanity's options were. Richard stood and walked to the strategic display. He entered his command codes and activated Protocol Omega. The display changed to show military assets that most of the council didn't know existed. Hidden weapons, secret shipyards, technologies developed in the shadows for exactly this scenario. Catherine Ross raised her eyebrows as she looked at the arsenal on display. She asked Richard how long humanity had been preparing for this. Richard smiled grimly and told her that humanity had been preparing since the day they found ancient alien ruins on Mars 80 years ago. They had found evidence of a galactic war that had wiped out an entire civilization. Humanity had vowed to never be caught unprepared. Now that preparation would be put to the test, Richard began issuing orders to mobilize the fleet. They had 48 hours before the Vrix deadline expired. That would be enough time. The Vrix thought they were attacking primitive prey. They were about to learn a terrible lesson about humanity. On Europa, Jacob Miller gathered the survivors and told them help was coming. He didn't know if he believed it himself, but these people needed hope. They had lost everything. Their homes, their friends, their families, all because aliens they had never met decided humanity didn't deserve to exist. Jacob looked up through the shattered ice at the stars above. Somewhere up there, the Vrix were celebrating their easy victory. They thought humanity was finished. Jacob clenched his fists and made a silent promise to every person who had died. The Vrix would pay for what they had done. Humanity would make sure of that. Admiral Richard Cole walked through the underground facility known as Site Omega, a place so secret that only 12 people in the entire government knew it existed. The facility stretched for miles beneath the Nevada desert, housing technologies that would seem like magic to most civilians. Commander Greg Turner met him at the entrance to the main weapons bay, a nervous smile on his face. Greg had been waiting his entire career for this moment, though he wished it had come under different circumstances. The weapons bay doors opened, revealing row after row of missiles, drones, and technologies that humanity had developed in secret. Greg explained each system with pride in his voice. The quantum disruption missiles could phase through enemy shields by existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The AI-assisted targeting systems could calculate firing solutions faster than any biological brain. Kinetic bombardment satellites orbited Earth, ready to drop tungsten rods that hit with the force of nuclear weapons. Self-replicating drone swarms could overwhelm any point defense system through sheer numbers. Richard listened carefully to every detail. He asked why humanity had built all this in secret, instead of using it for peaceful exploration. Greg's expression turned serious as he explained. When scientists found those ruins on Mars 80 years ago, they discovered something terrifying. The aliens who built those cities had been peaceful explorers, much like humanity. Then they encountered a hostile species and were wiped out within a generation because they weren't prepared for war. Humanity decided that day to never make the same mistake. They would explore peacefully but prepare for the worst. Every discovery in physics was evaluated for military applications. Every breakthrough in computing was tested for tactical uses. Humanity built their defense in shadow while showing a peaceful face to the cosmos. Now that preparation would save them. At the fighter pilot training facility in Colorado, Amy Stone sat in the briefing room with 300 other pilots. Her hand shook as she stared at the photograph in her lap. Her brother Danny had been a mining engineer on Europa. He was supposed to come home next month for their mother's birthday. Now he was gone, vaporized by aliens who didn't even care to learn his name. The briefing officer called for volunteers for the most dangerous missions. Amy's hand shot up before she could think about it. She wanted to hurt the Vrix the way they had hurt her family. She wanted them to feel the pain they had caused. Kyle Bennett grabbed her arm and whispered that she needed to think clearly. He was her squadron mate and closest friend in the service. He reminded her that rage made pilots sloppy, and sloppy pilots died quickly. Amy pulled her arm away and told him she was thinking perfectly clearly. The Vrix had started this war. She intended to finish it. In the research complex beneath Geneva, Dr. Oliver Davis addressed the Emergency Defense Council via video link. He was humanity's leading weapons scientist, a brilliant mind who had dedicated 40 years to preparing for first contact with hostile aliens. His gray hair and wrinkled face made him look grandfatherly, but his eyes held cold calculation. Oliver explained to the council why humanity had an advantage the Vrix didn't expect. The Vrix had conquered 17 species who were weaker than themselves. They had never faced an equal opponent. Their tactics were straightforward because they had never needed to be clever. Humanity, on the other hand, had spent thousands of years fighting itself. Humans had perfected warfare through countless conflicts. They knew every trick, every strategy, every way to turn weakness into strength. President Catherine Ross asked Oliver if he was confident humanity could win. Oliver was silent for a moment before responding. He said that confidence wasn't the right word. Humanity had to win because there was no other option. Surrender meant slavery or extinction. But yes, humanity had the tools and the will to defeat the Vrix. The massive shipyards orbiting Earth, Luna, and Mars burst into activity. Workers who had been building civilian vessels switched to military production. Cargo ships were retrofitted with weapons and armor. Mining drones were reprogrammed for combat. Every resource humanity had was directed toward one goal: building a fleet strong enough to face the Vrix. Within 36 hours, Admiral Cole had assembled a response fleet that exceeded his initial expectations. 12 heavy battlecruisers formed the backbone, each one larger than a city block and armed with enough firepower to level a small moon. 40 destroyers provided fast attack capability and point defense. 200 fighter craft would deliver precision strikes. Thousands of autonomous combat drones would overwhelm enemy defenses through sheer numbers. The flagship was named Retribution, a name that reflected humanity's mood perfectly. Richard established his command center in the ship's bridge, surrounded by the best tactical officers Earth had to offer. He looked at the fleet assembled around him and felt a surge of pride. Humanity had built all of this in secret, waiting for a day they hoped would never come. Far away in the Vrix fleet, Commander Zethrax monitored human activities through long-range sensors. His intelligence officer, a younger Vrix named Krath, showed concern about the readings they were detecting. The human ships showed unusual energy signatures. Their formation patterns suggested sophisticated tactical doctrine. Krath advised caution and recommended additional reconnaissance before engaging. Zethrax dismissed the warning with a wave of his clawed hand. He had conquered worlds that resisted much harder than these humans. He had destroyed species with more advanced technology. The humans were panicking and assembling whatever ships they could find. Their fleet looked impressive in numbers but would crumble under Vrix plasma cannons. Krath tried again to express his concerns, but Zethrax ordered him to be silent. The Vrix commander's pride wouldn't allow him to admit that these primitive apes might pose a real threat. He had delivered the ultimatum, and the humans had responded by gathering their military. Now he would crush that military and force their surrender. It would be glorious. Back on Earth, final preparations were being made. Admiral Cole assembled his command staff for one last briefing before departure. Rachel Quinn, his newly promoted second-in-command, presented the tactical analysis. She was young for such a high position, only 32, but her mind worked like a quantum computer. She had developed the multi-vector assault doctrine that would be central to their strategy. Rachel explained the plan using simple language so everyone understood. The Vrix fought like bullies, using superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm opponents. Humanity would fight like hunters using speed, deception, and precision. They would hit the Vrix from multiple angles simultaneously, never letting them establish a firing rhythm. They would target specific systems rather than trying to destroy entire ships. They would make every shot count. Richard approved the plan and dismissed the staff to their stations. As Rachel left, he called her back for a private word. He told her that many of these people wouldn't be coming home. War always demanded blood, especially against an enemy like the Vrix. Rachel nodded, her expression grave. She understood the cost but believed in the necessity. Amy Stone climbed into her fighter's cockpit and ran through the pre-flight checklist. Her fighter was called a Raptor, a sleek vessel designed for speed and agility. It carried enough missiles to take down a destroyer and could outmaneuver anything the Vrix had. She named her Raptor Danny's Revenge and had her brother's photograph taped to the console. Kyle's voice came through her headset, asking if she was ready. Amy confirmed and fired up the engines. Her squadron consisted of 20 pilots, all volunteers, all ready to face whatever came. The hangars depressurized and the fighters launched into space. The fleet assembled in formation and began accelerating toward their chosen battlefield. Admiral Cole had selected Saturn's rings as the engagement zone. The dense field of ice and rock would provide cover for human tactics, while limiting the Vrix's ability to use their numbers advantage. It was the perfect killing ground. As the fleet traveled, Richard recorded a message to be sent to every human colony in the solar system. He spoke clearly and calmly, explaining what was about to happen. Humanity was going to war, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. The Vrix had attacked first, killing thousands of innocents. Now humanity would respond with everything they had. Richard ended the message with a promise. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would not bow, and humanity would make certain that the Vrix regretted the day they decided to attack Earth's children. The message was broadcast across all channels, and billions of humans watched with fear and hope in their hearts. The human fleet emerged from acceleration near Saturn's magnificent rings, taking position among billions of chunks of ice and rock. Admiral Richard Cole stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the tactical display as his ships moved into their assigned positions. The rings provided natural cover, turning the battlefield into a three-dimensional maze where skill would matter more than raw firepower. Captain Ryan Clark commanded the destroyer Vengeance from his position in the forward battle group. His ship was smaller and faster than the battlecruisers, designed for hit-and-run attacks. Ryan had served in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years, but this would be his first real battle. He kept his hands steady on the command console, refusing to let his crew see his nervousness. The Vrix fleet arrived exactly when Richard expected. 50 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a standard attack formation. Their ships were massive, built more for intimidation than efficiency. Each one bristled with plasma cannons that glowed with deadly energy. Commander Zethrax broadcast from his flagship, demanding humanity's immediate surrender. Richard ignored the transmission and ordered radio silence across the fleet. The Vrix interpreted the silence as fear and accelerated toward the human position. Zethrax was eager to finish this battle quickly and report his victory to the Dominion Council. He couldn't wait to see the look on their faces when he told them he had conquered humanity in a single day. The Vrix opened fire first, their plasma cannons lighting up space with brilliant green bolts. The shots crossed thousands of miles in seconds, slamming into human shields. The Retribution shook as multiple impacts drained its defensive systems. Damage reports flooded in from across the fleet, but Richard remained calm. He had expected the first strike to hurt. Now it was humanity's turn. Richard gave the order to engage. The human fleet exploded into action with practiced precision. Every ship knew its role. Every pilot knew their target. The destroyers accelerated into the rings, using the ice chunks as cover while they closed distance. The battlecruisers returned fire with railguns that sent metal slugs flying at a fraction of light speed. The fighters launched in swarms, filling space with thousands of small, fast targets. Amy Stone dove her fighter through a gap in the rings, her targeting computer locking onto a Vrix cruiser. Her squadron followed in perfect formation, 20 fighters moving like a school of fish. The Vrix point defense systems tried to track them, but couldn't keep up with their speed and coordination. Amy launched her missiles and broke hard to the left, pulling 10 times normal gravity. Her flight suit squeezed her body to keep blood in her brain. The missiles struck the Vrix cruiser's flank, and Amy's eyes widened as she saw the result. The quantum disruption warheads phased through the enemy shields like they weren't even there. The explosions tore into the ship's hull, venting atmosphere and debris. Kyle's voice came through her headset, celebrating the hit. Amy allowed herself a small smile. One hit for Danny. Captain Ryan Clark brought the Vengeance around a massive ice boulder and found himself facing a Vrix destroyer at point-blank range. Both ships fired simultaneously, The Vrix plasma bolts scorched the Vengeance's armor while Ryan's railguns punched clean through the enemy ship's midsection. The two vessels passed within 100 meters of each other, close enough that Ryan could see the alien crew through their viewports. Aboard the Retribution, engineer Melissa Ford monitored the enemy ship signatures with fascination. She noticed something odd about the Vrix power systems. Their energy readings fluctuated in a pattern that suggested poor electromagnetic shielding around their reactor cores. It was a design flaw, one that could be exploited. She immediately contacted Admiral Cole with her findings. Richard listened to Melissa's explanation and understood the implications instantly. If they could generate a powerful enough electromagnetic pulse at close range, they could shut down Vrix ships without destroying them. He ordered the weapons division to modify several warheads for maximum EMP effect. They would need someone to deliver the payload at close range, close enough that the pilot probably wouldn't survive. Lieutenant Chris Morgan volunteered before Richard finished explaining the mission. Chris was a fighter pilot in his early 20s, fresh-faced and idealistic. He had joined the Defense Force to protect people, and now he had a chance to save the entire fleet. His hands didn't shake as he climbed into his fighter and loaded the modified warhead. The battle raged around Chris as he accelerated toward the Vrix formation. Enemy fire filled space with deadly plasma bolts. He watched 3 other fighters disintegrate as they were hit. His targeting computer screamed warnings about missile locks and incoming fire. Chris ignored it all, focusing only on his target, the largest Vrix battleship in the center of their formation. Rachel Quinn coordinated the fleet's movements from her tactical station, her fingers dancing across multiple control surfaces simultaneously. She could see the entire battle in her mind like a chess game. The Vrix fought in rigid formations, predictable and inflexible. Humanity fought like water, flowing around obstacles and striking from unexpected angles. It was working. The Vrix were losing ships faster than they could adapt. Chris Morgan's fighter took a glancing hit from plasma fire, and half his systems went offline. The cockpit filled with smoke, and his left arm burned where shrapnel had torn through his flight suit. He kept flying with one hand, adjusting course toward the Vrix battleship. His radio crackled with voices telling him to abort to save himself. Chris switched off the radio. He had made his choice. The Vrix battleship's point defense systems locked onto Chris's fighter. A dozen plasma cannons swiveled to track him. Chris punched his afterburners and dove straight at the enemy ship, accelerating to speeds that should have torn his fighter apart. The targeting computer achieved lock. Chris whispered a prayer and released the EMP warhead. The explosion wasn't visible in the traditional sense. There was no fireball or shockwave. Instead, a pulse of electromagnetic energy radiated outward in a perfect sphere. Chris's fighter, at the center of the blast, simply ceased to exist. The Vrix battleship's lights flickered and died. 2 nearby cruisers went dark. A destroyer's power core destabilized and exploded, taking the ship with it. Amy watched Chris die and felt her heart break. She had known him since training. He used to make jokes about terrible food in the mess hall. He had a girlfriend waiting for him on Mars. Now he was gone, sacrificed to give humanity an advantage. Amy blinked back tears and refocused on her mission. Chris's death would mean something. She would make certain of that. Commander Zethrak stood on his flagship's bridge, watching in disbelief as his fleet fell apart. This wasn't possible. Humans were supposed to be weak, disorganized, inferior. Instead, they fought with a coordination and ferocity that surpassed anything he had encountered. His ships were dying. His carefully planned formation was shattered. His warriors were panicking. Krath, the intelligence officer, reported that they had lost 15 ships in just 2 hours. Casualty estimates were over 8,000 Vrix warriors dead. The humans showed no signs of slowing down. Krath recommended immediate withdrawal before they lost the entire fleet. Zethrax wanted to refuse, wanted to keep fighting, but he knew Krath was right. Pride wouldn't save him from a court-martial if he lost the whole fleet. Zethrax gave the order to retreat. The surviving Vrix ships broke formation and accelerated toward the jump point. The humans pursued, destroying 3 more ships before the Vrix could escape into faster-than-light travel. Then they were gone, leaving behind debris fields and the bodies of thousands of warriors who would never return home. Admiral Richard Cole watched the enemy flee and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Humanity had won its first battle against an alien power. The Vrix had come expecting an easy victory, and instead found themselves facing an opponent who refused to die quietly. Richard hoped the message was clear. Humanity could be pushed, but they would always push back harder. The fleet regrouped and began damage assessment. 8 human ships were destroyed, with another 20 damaged. 3,000 personnel were dead, including Chris Morgan and dozens of other pilots who had given everything. Richard ordered flags lowered to half-mast across the fleet. These people deserved to be honored. Amy Stone landed her fighter in the Retribution's hangar bay, her hands finally shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Kyle helped her out of the cockpit and held her as she cried for Chris, for Danny, for everyone who had died today. Kyle whispered that it wasn't over yet. The Vrix would come back, probably with more ships. They needed to be ready. Richard addressed the fleet from the bridge, his words broadcast to every ship and every station. He thanked them for their courage and sacrifice. He reminded them that they had fought to protect their homes and families. But he also warned them that this was just the beginning. The Vrix would return, and next time they would be prepared for human tactics. Humanity needed to stay one step ahead. President Catherine Ross stood before the assembled United Nations of Earth in Geneva, her face projected on screens across every human colony. The chamber was silent as she explained the choice facing humanity. They had won a defensive battle at Saturn, but the Vrix threat remained. Defense Minister Paul White argued loudly for a defensive posture, building up Earth's orbital defenses and waiting for the next attack. Admiral Richard Cole stepped forward with a different proposal. His voice was steady as he explained why defense alone wouldn't work. The Vrix controlled 17 star systems and commanded vast resources. They could afford to lose battles and keep coming back. Humanity couldn't. Every battle fought near Earth risked billions of civilian lives. Richard proposed something that had never been done before. Take the war to the enemy's home system and end the threat permanently. The chamber erupted in argument. Half the delegates thought Richard was insane. The other half looked at the tactical displays and realized he was right. Catherine let them argue for an hour before calling for silence. She asked Richard directly if he believed humanity could win such a battle. Richard met her eyes and told her that humanity would win because the alternative was unthinkable. Dr. Sophie Martin worked in a secure facility beneath Stockholm, surrounded by computers and alien technology, salvaged from destroyed Vrix ships. She was a xenolinguist, someone who specialized in understanding alien languages and cultures. The Vrix communication systems had been heavily encrypted, but Sophie was very good at her job. After 3 days of continuous work, she cracked their codes. The decoded messages revealed valuable intelligence about the Vrix Dominion. Their empire spanned 17 star systems, but their military was spread dangerously thin. Most Vrix warships were assigned to occupation duty, keeping conquered species under control. The fleet that attacked Europa represented nearly a quarter of their total mobile forces. The defeat at Saturn had hurt them badly. Sophie found navigation data that showed the route to Vrix Prime, the aliens' homeworld. The journey required 3 faster-than-light jumps and would take approximately 3 weeks. She also discovered something interesting about Vrix culture. They had never lost a war in their 300-year history. Every species they encountered had either surrendered quickly or been crushed. The concept of defeat was alien to them. Tactical Officer Nathan King used Sophie's data to create detailed star charts and battle plans. Nathan was a quiet man who preferred computers to people, but his strategic mind was invaluable. He identified the optimal jump points and calculated fuel requirements for the fleet. The numbers were tight. They would have enough resources to reach Vrix Prime and fight one major battle, but not enough to retreat if things went wrong. It would be all or nothing. Humanity mobilized its industrial capacity like never before. Every shipyard worked around the clock. Workers pulled double shifts building new vessels and repairing damaged ones. The orbital platforms around Luna constructed fighters at a rate of 20 per day. Mars shipyards focused on destroyers and support craft. Earth's massive facilities built the heavy battle cruisers that would form the fleet's backbone. Within 2 weeks, the human armada had grown to impressive size. 30 battle cruisers anchored the fleet, each one a fortress of weapons and armor. 100 destroyers provided fast attack capability. 500 fighter craft filled multiple carrier vessels. 2,000 autonomous combat drones waited in storage bays ready to be deployed. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Admiral Cole walked through the Retribution's corridors, speaking with crew members and checking preparations. He found Amy Stone in the pilot ready room, staring at a photograph of her brother. Richard sat down beside her and asked how she was holding up. Amy admitted she was scared. She had lost her brother and watched Chris die. She didn't know if she could keep fighting. Richard told her a story about his own sister, who had died in a mining accident on Luna 30 years ago. He said the pain never fully went away, but you learned to carry it. You honored the dead by living well and protecting others from the same fate. Amy listened and nodded slowly. She asked Richard if he really thought they could win. He told her they had to, so they would find a way. Tyler Brooks led a briefing for the Marine assault teams in the Retribution's training bay. Tyler was a career soldier, broad-shouldered and covered in scars from a dozen training accidents. His Marines would be responsible for ground operations if the fleet succeeded in breaking Vrick's orbital defenses. Their mission was to capture communication centers and prevent the Vricks from calling. Reinforcements from other systems, the Marines trained constantly during the 3-week journey to Vrick's Prime. They practiced zero-gravity combat, atmospheric drops, and urban warfare. Tyler pushed them hard because he knew how difficult their job would be. The Vricks were physically stronger than humans and had home field advantage. The Marines would need every edge they could get. Amy found herself becoming friends with Tyler during the journey. They ate meals together in the mess hall and talked about their lives before the war. Tyler had grown up on Earth in a small town in Colorado. He joined the military because he wanted to see space. Amy told him about growing up on Mars with Danny, about their dreams of exploring the outer planets together. Tyler listened without judgment, letting her grieve. Rachel Quinn spent the journey refining the battle plan. She simulated hundreds of scenarios, looking for weaknesses in their strategy. The multi-vector assault doctrine worked well in simulations, but real battles were messy and unpredictable. Rachel prepared contingency plans for every possibility she could imagine. If the Vricks had more ships than expected, if their weapons were more powerful, if they had new technology. Rachel planned for it all. Far away on Vrick's Prime, Commander Zethrax faced the Dominion Council in chains. The council chamber was a massive dome filled with the most powerful members of Vrick society. Elder Vorthak, the council leader, pronounced judgment with cold fury. Zethrax had lost 15 warships and allowed humans to win a battle. Such failure was unacceptable. He was stripped of command and sentenced to execution. Fleet Commander Draxul received command of Vrick's military forces. Draxul was older than Zethrax and far more experienced. He had conquered 6 systems personally and never lost a battle. He reviewed the reports from Saturn and realized these humans were more dangerous than anyone expected. They fought with creativity and courage. They used tactics Draxul had never encountered. He would not underestimate them. Draxul mobilized every available warship to defend Vrick's Prime. 120 vessels assembled in orbit around the homeworld. Orbital defense platforms ringed the planet, massive weapons emplacements that could destroy a battleship with a single shot. Ground-based particle cannons added additional firepower. Draxul was confident that no enemy could break through such defenses. The human fleet made its final faster-than-light jump and emerged in the Vrick system. Admiral Richard Cole looked at the tactical display and felt his stomach clench. The enemy force was 3 times larger than intelligence estimates predicted. The orbital defenses were more extensive than they had expected. This battle would be the hardest fight humanity had ever faced. Richard opened a communication channel to the Vrick's homeworld. His message was simple and direct. Humanity offered the Vricks one chance to surrender peacefully, return all conquered territories, disband their military and submit to human oversight. Refuse, and humanity would take those things by force. Richard already knew what the answer would be, but he had to offer peace one final time. Draxul's response came in the form of weapons fire. Every Vrick ship and platform opened fire simultaneously, filling space with plasma bolts. The answer was clear. There would be no surrender. No negotiation, only battle. Richard closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his expression was hard as diamond. He gave the order to advance. The human fleet accelerated toward Vrick's Prime, toward the largest space battle in galactic history. Every person aboard those ships knew that many of them wouldn't survive the day. But they also knew they fought for something bigger than themselves. They fought for humanity's future among the stars. Amy climbed into her fighter's cockpit one more time. She looked at Danny's photograph and whispered that she loved him. Then she closed her helmet and launched into space. Behind her, 500 other fighters did the same. Above them, the battle cruisers and destroyers moved into attack formation. Below them, Tyler and his Marines prepared their drop pods. The battle for Vrix Prime had begun. The battle for Vrix Prime began with fire and fury. Rachel Quinn's tactical display showed chaos as 120 alien warships engaged 30 human battlecruisers. The numbers seemed impossible, but Rachel had planned for exactly this scenario. She activated the multi-vector assault protocol, and the human fleet split into 12 smaller groups that attacked from every angle simultaneously. The Vrix expected traditional warfare, massive formations exchanging broadsides until one side broke. Instead, human destroyers darted between enemy ships like wolves hunting buffalo. They targeted specific systems rather than trying to destroy entire vessels. A railgun shot to the engines here, a missile strike to weapons arrays there. Each attack degraded enemy capability without wasting firepower. Captain Ian Foster commanded the battlecruiser Indomitable, positioning his ship at the edge of the Vrix orbital defense network. His sensors detected the power signatures of 3 massive defense platforms, each one capable of obliterating a battleship. Ian knew what he had to do. He ordered his crew to evacuate to escape pods while he stayed at the helm alone. The Indomitable accelerated directly toward the defense platforms, drawing their fire. Plasma bolts hammered the ship's shields until they collapsed, then tore into armor and hull. Ian felt the heat as sections of his ship vaporized around him. His hands remained steady on the controls as he guided the dying vessel on collision course. The Indomitable struck the first platform and detonated its reactor core. The explosion destroyed all 3 platforms and opened a hole in Vrix orbital defenses. Admiral Richard Cole watched Ian's sacrifice on the tactical display and felt grief mixed with pride. Ian had given humanity the opening they needed. Richard ordered the fleet to push through the gap. The battlecruisers formed a wedge and drove deep into Vrix formations, their weapons firing continuously. Amy Stone led her fighter squadron through the gap Ian created, diving into Vrix Prime's upper atmosphere. Her mission was to destroy military installations on the surface, while the main fleet dealt with orbital forces. The Vrix atmosphere was thicker than Earth's and filled with purple clouds. Amy's targeting system struggled to lock onto ground targets through the interference. A Vrix fighter emerged from the clouds on her tail. Amy pulled hard into a vertical climb, her engines screaming with effort. The enemy pilot matched her maneuver perfectly. They spiraled upward together, each trying to get a firing angle on the other. Amy's skills were better. She inverted her fighter at the top of the climb and came down on the enemy's back. Her missiles turned the Vrix fighter into debris. Kyle's voice came through her headset, reporting that he had found a major military complex. Amy joined his attack run, and together they released their bombs. The explosions below created a mushroom cloud visible from orbit. Amy felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. Every target destroyed meant fewer weapons shooting at the fleet. Tyler Brooks and his Marines hit Vrix Prime's surface in drop pods that screamed through the atmosphere at terminal velocity. The pods slammed into the ground near a communication complex, and the Marines burst out with weapons ready. Vrix warriors rushed to defend their facility, but Tyler's team had trained for this exact scenario. The battle was brutal in close quarters. Vrix warriors were stronger than humans, but humans were faster and fought with desperate courage. Tyler's team used grenades and concentrated fire to overwhelm individual defenders. Within 30 minutes, they had captured the communication center. Tyler's technical specialist destroyed the equipment that would have called Vrix reinforcements from other systems. Dr. Oliver Davis watched the battle from the science bay aboard the Retribution. His new weapon, the gravitational disruptor, had been loaded onto 3 different battlecruisers. Oliver gave the order to fire when targeting solutions were achieved. The disruptors released pulses of warped spacetime that collapsed the structural integrity of matter itself. 3 Vrix battleships simply ceased to exist in any meaningful form. One moment they were firing at human forces, the next they imploded into spheres of compressed metal and organic matter. The effect was so horrifying that nearby Vrix ships broke formation in panic. They had never seen anything like it. They didn't know how to fight against weapons that violated the laws of physics as they understood them. Fleet Commander Drac Zul watched his carefully planned defense collapse in real time. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They attacked from impossible angles, used weapons that shouldn't exist, and displayed a coordination that suggested either advanced artificial intelligence or some form of shared consciousness. His warriors were dying by the thousands. Drakzul tried to rally his forces, ordering them to concentrate fire on individual human ships. The tactic worked briefly, destroying several destroyers and damaging 2 battlecruisers. But the humans adapted faster than he could adjust. They shifted formations, created new attack vectors, and exploited every weakness his forces revealed. It was like fighting smoke. After 18 hours of continuous combat, Drakzul accepted the terrible truth. He was losing. His fleet had been reduced from 120 ships to 48. The orbital platforms were destroyed. The ground defenses were being systematically eliminated by human fighters and marines. If he continued fighting, his entire fleet would be annihilated. Drakzul attempted to order a retreat, but human forces had surrounded Vrix Prime. Every escape vector was covered by destroyers or fighter squadrons. The humans had no intention of letting the Vrix fleet escape. This wouldn't be a battle. It would be an execution. Admiral Richard Cole opened a direct communication channel to Elder Vorthak on the planet's surface. His words were delivered without emotion or mercy. Humanity offered terms of surrender: immediate dissolution of the Vrix dominion, liberation of all conquered species, reduction of Vrix military to system defense only, human observers stationed on Vrix Prime for 50 years, war reparations for Europa. Accept these terms or humanity would reduce Vrix Prime to rubble. Vorthak tried to negotiate, to bargain for better terms. Richard cut him off coldly. These weren't negotiation points. They were facts. The Vrix had attacked humanity without provocation. They had murdered civilians. They had threatened extinction. Now humanity dictated terms. Accept or die. Vorthak looked around his council chamber at the other elders. They had spent 300 years conquering weaker species, believing themselves superior. Now they sat in their capital city, while human warships burned their fleet and occupied their world. The bitter taste of defeat filled Vorthak's mouth as he accepted humanity's terms. The remaining Vrix ships powered down their weapons and surrendered. Admiral Cole ordered ceasefire across the human fleet. The sudden silence felt wrong after hours of constant combat. Damage reports flooded in. Humanity had lost 40% of the fleet, 12 battle cruisers and 50 destroyers destroyed. 9,000 personnel were dead, including Captain Ian Foster and dozens of pilots who never made it home. Amy Stone landed her fighter on Vrix Prime's surface near the communication complex Tyler had captured. She climbed out of her cockpit and looked at the alien city burning in the distance. Vrix civilians wandered the streets in shock, their world forever changed. Amy felt exhausted, empty. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. Tyler approached her, his armor scorched and dented from combat. He told her the Marines were setting up a command post and asked if she wanted to help. Amy shook her head. She just wanted to sit for a moment and process what had happened. Tyler understood and sat beside her without speaking. Kyle joined them a few minutes later, his fighter limping on one engine. The three of them sat together on the alien planet's surface, watching human ships establish orbital control. They had come to Vrix Prime to end a war, and they had succeeded. But the cost had been terrible. Over the following weeks, humanity fulfilled its promise to liberate the 17 species conquered by the Vrix. Human ships visited each system, removed Vrix occupation forces, and helped establish independent governments. Many of the freed species had been enslaved for generations. They viewed humans as saviors, though Richard was careful to explain that humanity sought no empire of its own. Ambassadors from the liberated species traveled to Earth, along with representatives from dozens of other civilizations who had heard about humanity's victory over the Vrix. President Catherine Ross hosted them all in Geneva, establishing the Interspecies Coalition for Peace. The coalition's charter contained one central rule: unprovoked aggression would be met with overwhelming force. Jacob Miller returned to Europa with the survivors and an army of engineers. They rebuilt the colony from scratch, using Vrix reparations to fund construction. A memorial was erected listing all 2,200 names of those who died in the original attack. Jacob personally added Danny Stone's name to the wall, thinking of Amy's sacrifice in the war that followed. Admiral Richard Cole retired from military service 6 months after the battle. He had accomplished what he set out to do, protect humanity from extinction. His doctrine became standard training for all Earth Defense Force personnel. Never strike first, but always strike last. Be prepared for war while hoping for peace. Show mercy when possible, but never.